You know what it is? I love it.
I've thought a lot about the way men live differently today than we lived 500 years ago. And I think 2,000, 3,000 is more similar to 500 years ago than it is to today. And one of the main differences that I see is that we're so much more intellectual today. I'm not saying smarter, I'm not saying wiser, I'm just saying that we think more than we used to. And my reason for saying that is just that we have so much more leisure. It's very possible, the general level of literacy being higher. There's a certain spirituality that in my own life I've gone through periods where I was a ditch digger, where I just did hard manual labor, and my spirituality before I went to bed was different. The thoughts that went through my head were different than when I had a lot of leisure, like in college, right? And I'm actually not sure that one state was preferable to the other, Yeah. It was just kind of a different spiritual challenge, in each state, And a lot of the things that we see, and I think sometimes when we read some of the fathers of the church and things, we're seeing advice and ideas given to people who are maybe living a different lifestyle than we are, not consuming as much TV, not reading as much literature, not surfing the internet constantly, not doing all these things, right? And we seem to have all these problems that could be more prevalent today because maybe we are more intellectual, like depression, scrupulosity, OCD type stuff. Do you have time to be OCD if you're a ditch digger? And in the Middle Ages, a lot of guys were digging ditches for a living, right? So maybe I gave that too much of an introduction. But one of the things that I wonder when I think about this is, if you are thinking that much, if you are that intellectual, you have less of an excuse to avoid Scripture. You need to be getting into it more because you're college educated, or however educated you are, but assuming you're college educated, then you should be engaging the teachings of the church at a different level than someone did 500 years ago who did not have that leisure, and that education. Is there a different idea of the Mass also or liturgy maybe, that we need to, for example, in the old Franciscans, it was if you could pray the Psalms, you could, and if you couldn't, you just said 25 Our Fathers or something like that instead of praying that many Psalms, right? You did something appropriate to your education level, say, right? Is there a sense in which liturgy also is being thought of or driven by this, or are there things that, because of where we are as a species, we need to change?
It's a great question, and in fact, one of the reasons I think we have a liturgical renewal is because of intellectual development, is because of scholarly research. Things had come to light even in the 19th century about the early liturgy of the church that people didn't know at the time of the Council of Trent. So having access to more of that and more scholars who could research that is part of what brought us to the stage of the liturgy where we are. I've learned a lot going through the revised translation of the Missal, just because I've started to look at where all these prayers come from, and I find it fascinating. Some of the collects that start the Mass have amazing references to the Scriptures that I think many people just have not been alert to, and to see them and think about them is another way of going into the prayer. So I guess I'd say two things about this. One is that if you want to bring intellectual scrutiny to the celebration of the Eucharist, the Mass is ready for that. There is no end to the things that you can think about, investigate, study, meditate on, and let your life be formed by it. It is amazingly deep. the prayers that we use at the Mass. And on the other hand, if that's not your interest, you just kind of want to come in and worship on Sundays and hope that the music is good and you catch something in the homily this week that'll help you lead a good life, the Mass is ready for that too. We can take people at any stage of their spiritual journey. I think that's one reason why the Eucharist has endured all this time, since the time of Christ. It has an amazing flexibility to work with the spiritual lives of the people. It can connect with everybody. It should connect with everybody, and I think we've seen that it does.